So hi everyone and welcome again. My name is Chris Wren. I'm the chair of this fabulous XDS Advisory Committee, and I'm also the head of XDI events with EA. And we're here today to discuss managing the new normal. And when I first thought to run this session, I saw it as a formal panel, kind of a traditional panel, but I prefer to approach this as more of a kind of a casual fireside chat. And in the spirit of that, I'd love for this session to be highly interactive with you fine folks that have attended today. So if you have a question or comment for this illustrious group, please use the virtual hand up feature in Zoom. I'll be able to see that, and I can take you off mute at any time during the session, and you guys will have the opportunity to address the group. So start thinking about questions and comments that you want to pose to these guys, and we'd be happy to answer those. So without further ado, I'd love to just do a round of introductions. I'm going to go through the Brady Bunch panel here for those of you that grew up in the 70s and 80s. Why don't we start with Cassie? I see you up in the top left. Cassie, name, title, company, where you're based, name of your pet, whatever you'd like to mention to the group.
Cassie O'Connor from Glue Mobile, and I am the Director of Outside Services there. I've been there about 11 years, and I'm currently based in Vancouver, Washington, not to be confused with Vancouver, BC. So it's like across the river from Portland, Oregon, but our headquarters in Glue is in San Francisco, so I split my time between the two cities. And my dog's name is Xian, after the city in China.
Very cool. Thanks, Cassie. Ashley.
Ashley Liu, Service Line Director for Keywords, Art and Marketing, based in Beijing, and formerly was founder CEO of MindWalk. I don't have a dog because just simply cannot see having a pet in Beijing.
And thank you very much for calling in at what time, your time right now, Ash?
It's only midnight. I usually still have a couple more hours to go.
Thank you so much. Carl.
Is that Carla or Carl?
Oh, yeah. Which one did you say?
Carl, please, with the one with the lovely bay in the background.
Ah, yes. So Carl Schmidt. I'm the Senior Director of External Development at Zynga, based in San Francisco. Let's see. Been there 8 years, something like that. I don't know. No pets here, but I have 2 little kids, 5 and 7, and I love them, but they're driving us insane during this. So.
And we will get to that sanity point later in the session, Carl. But thank you for that, Sam.
Hi, Sam here from Xbox Game Studios. I'm based up in Sheffield in the UK at the moment, and I too don't have any pets, but I do have a 2.5-year-old who's getting a little bit more active, I think, than he would do normally. So yeah, keeping my hands busy, that's for sure.
Cool. Thanks, Sam. Carla.
Hi everyone, I'm Carla Rylance. I'm the External Development Manager at the Coalition, which is an Xbox game studio, and we're located in Vancouver, Canada. I do have a dog. His name's Ozzy. He looks exactly like a Chewbacca, and there's an 80% chance you'll hear him bark at some point during this webinar.
I actually hope so. Thanks, Carla. Grayson.
Oh, so hey everyone, my name is Grayson Chalmers. So I'm a Senior Outsource Manager at Wildlife Studios, based in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Let's see, and that's Dora, but she's too lazy to come on camera.
Dora will make an appearance eventually.
Probably, yeah.
Cool, thanks, Grayson. And Philip.
I'm Philip Dennison, Senior Producer for Outsourcing at Monolith Productions, part of WB Games. I'm based in Seattle, and I have a very loving American Staffordshire Terrier named Sarah, who is about as excited whenever I come upstairs from my basement office as when I come home from work.
All right, thanks, Phil. And last but not least, Arun.
Hey everyone, Arun Gowda, working for Dambuster as a senior producer. I don't have any pets, but I've got a 7-year-old son. I think he's just playing in the background now, but if you hear some noise, that's my son playing in the background. He's playing his Lego games. What else? Yeah, I love to play Minecraft with him. So after this call, that's the plan to play Minecraft.
Cool. I think if there, thanks everyone. I think if there's one nice thing that's a silver lining of all this is we've all got a really clear, intimate understanding for each other's personal lives and their pets and children and activities, and maybe in that sense bringing people a little bit more closer together. So no doubt, you know, this has been a difficult time for all of you, both in your personal and professional lives, and things have happened so quickly. Consider where you were just a few weeks ago, or, you know, Ash, a couple of months ago, and all of the changes that have happened since then. I just want to start by asking you guys, how are you doing? Can any of you with absolute confidence say that you have figured out how to efficiently work from home and keep your sanity? Anyone like to step up and address that?
I can tell you right now, I can hear the ruckus upstairs of my wife, who also works constantly on calls as well, and the kids going insane because they have to start doing school classwork online again, and they're just refusing to do it. There was a total meltdown yesterday, and it's very distracting. It's hard to get anything done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How about the rest?
I have it a little bit.
Sanity. Phil, please.
I think I have it a little bit easier because my kids are older. They're, don't tell me, 16 and 18. And so they've approached the isolation in a sort of a mature way, which has made it pretty easy for me. It's actually been nice to have the extra family time with not a lot of stress. But it is challenging. The professional aspect is actually pretty challenging, trying to get all of the different pieces. The alignment for the project is harder than I would have expected. So, and just the on the personal side, the fear of the pandemic, the fear of loved ones getting sick, or anybody in the family getting sick, it's pretty scary.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry to interrupt, guys. Alex, I see you just joined us. Thank you so much. We're just in the midst of the webinar, of course. Do you want to just give a quick introduction for yourself for the audience?
Yeah. Hi. Sorry, I was late. I was having Zoom issues. I'm actually in a parking lot right now where I dropped my dog off at the vet. That's how we do it now. My name is Alex Stein. I am the lead artist in charge of external development at Treyarch, which is an Activision-owned studio in Santa Monica. And I've been a member of the XDS Advisory Committee for a couple of years now.
Cool, thanks, Alex. And you are working extraordinarily remote today, being in your car.
Yeah, I forgot we had a vet appointment.
No worries at all. I'm really glad you could join. Yep. Just getting back to the question, I mean, Carla, I know you delivered a talk at XDS 2019 that addressed a lot about like how you find joy in your workspace, in your environment. Have you been able to recreate that at home?
I'm doing my absolute best. I've still got my happy light installed. My desk is looking pretty snazzy right now. Everything's set up exactly how I want it, so I feel good about sitting down at my desk every day. Overall, I'm very lucky. I can work from home, and I can work from home very comfortably. We use Microsoft Teams, so we can have all of our meetings with our team every day. I'm also having to work in the same space as my fiance. We live in like a shoebox apartment in Vancouver, and so trying to have calls at the same time can be very challenging. But we're learning to work around that. So yeah, I mean, the space I've got is very comfortable, and it's starting to feel a little more normal for me now. Mm-hmm. It's only taken 5 weeks. So yeah, getting there, but slowly.
Cool.
I can take a unique view. I've been working from home full time for 3 years now. So this isn't totally different for me, but I think what it's done is that it's kind of opened eyes to other people who do have to work from home now, that it's not as beautiful and great as everyone thinks it is. There are definitely challenges, and that I do miss office life here and there. But I think it just gives more people understanding for us who do work from home full time, that it's not just like the best life ever. It can get frustrating.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, guys. And I think myself and everyone on the call can certainly empathize with how you're doing and how you're feeling. And I think empathy is an important quality for everyone to have during this time. So let's get in a time machine for a moment. We're going to go back 6 weeks to mid-March. So around that time, the virus was spreading quickly to new countries. GDC had finally made the decision to cancel the event. WHO declared COVID-19 a global pandemic, and major employers like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, among others, were shutting their offices and asking employees to work from home. So if you can put yourself in that time machine and go back to that time of uncertainty, describe for me what questions you and your team were asking yourselves and steps you began to take to adapt to the situation. And I know it feels so long ago, guys, but can you take us back to that moment and think about what you were going through again? What questions were you asking yourselves and steps you were taking to adapt?
For my team, we were watching it very closely and starting to put plans into motion, I think, and inquiring with our partners, if they were going to be working from home, could they continue working? Things about security started coming up. Security was the biggest thing for us. But it hadn't really sunk in that we were all going to be working from home yet, I don't think, at that point. So, when things started getting canceled and GDC made that decision and we made that decision, it started to really sink in. And then we're like, okay, now we have to have a plan, and our work strategy as a corporation had to have a plan. So it came about very quickly. And again, I think the security part was probably the hardest thing for us.
So I'll chime in, given that for China, at least, it was Chinese New Year when this all happened. And I think we had the luxury of Chinese New Year to actually respond when everybody was still at home. And I think at that time, if I look back, a couple of things I think I was happy to do. One is to inform all of our partners that it looks like China is going to get shut down. And the second thing that we really worried about was how our employees, the safety of our employees. And that was something that was important. And we had to get enough materials into the studios, things like masks and hand sanitizers and so forth, because we know if we didn't have that, we would be shut down. And then it's working with IT to have these solutions and getting the okay from all of our partners to make sure that they were okay with the solutions that we're coming up with to continue production. And we didn't know how long it was going to last. And I think that was something that was a bit scary. And then the other thing is the government changed their rules on a weekly basis. This week it was okay, next week it wasn't. And to have the agility and to a team that can respond to that quickly was something that was great. And I didn't anticipate from where I was sitting that it would spread so quickly globally. As some of you know, there were studios that I was overseeing in the UK and Canada and so forth. And I think a few things I would have done differently. I wish that I could have anticipated that and been asking them to be more ready for it. And I think we did okay because the IT teams that solved the China security and work from home issues also solved the issues for India and UK and so forth. But there's other things that I think we could have done better. So that's my retrospective of what's been going on for the past 3 months.
I think for me, it's interesting hearing Ashley's perspective, because I think that time period you were talking about was maybe a month to a month and a half earlier than the period Chris posed in his question, which doesn't seem like a lot of time, but everything really changed very quickly. At the time you're talking about, Ashley, I was being asked by studio heads and the publisher, hey, what are you going to do about the situation in China? We have a lot of external partners in China. And, you know, we were looking for other avenues while China was figuring out how long they were going to be out for. But compared to what we're in right now, in my opinion, China came back really quickly. It was by March, a lot of the studios we were working with were at near or back to full strength, including some keyword studios. So when we were starting to contemplate during the period Chris was referring to, moving to work from home, I think in my head, I still had it like what China went through. It was about 2 or 3 weeks, and then you started seeing people start coming back. Obviously, that's not the case, at least here in the States, and from what I'm seeing elsewhere in the world. But that, as Carl said earlier, I didn't quite believe it when it started to stretch into April and now May and June, just because it was such a rapid turnaround in China. So I was still in a very unique perspective in March. I didn't have the full picture yet.
I think it was interesting that there seemed to be an initial phase where the thoughts were around how do we outrun it. So it's like, well, a lot of the inquiries are around what are the studios that aren't in China? What are the studios that won't be affected by this? What are the countries that are safe to operate in? And those are the initial kind of inquiries. And that seemed to be the initial strategy was, right, how do we mitigate what's the restrictions in the East? And then you watched in the space of 2 to 3 weeks, that strategy just become no longer relevant. And I think what was interesting was watching how that strategy of trying to outrun it stopped at the same time that we also, all the studios had to get used to the idea that remote working was now a thing. So it kind of went through this phase of, well, we're all having to do it now. So the pressure to outrun it would have to go anyway, because it's something that we all have to do. But yeah, that was the first phase for me. The first kind of real wave for me was the, hey, where's safe to work? And then moving on from there.
I mean, on that topic, and I think I know the answer to this question, but can any of you honestly say that, you know, you or your company had we'll say a disaster recovery plan in place to accommodate this situation, or in fact, did any of your partners have an adequate disaster recovery plan in place?
This is being recorded, right?
It is. Well, Sam, when we were chatting the other day, I think you even made a comment that at one point on your due diligence, part of your due diligence process, you did have a disaster recovery plan for partners. And I think EA and other companies probably did as well, but I'm not sure that really that helped to mitigate the situation.
Well, yeah, it didn't. So we have, it is a question that we'll ask. What's your disaster recovery plan? And in all honesty, it's not one that we very often get an answer to, because it's a really big question. And for a lot of studios, it's not something you consider. But the disaster recovery plans are usually like around what happens if your studio is roped off and you can't get access to the building for a week, or there's a flood or whatever. Nobody has a what happens if the world blows up plan. And it's even then, even having a disaster recovery plan in place, unless there are component parts that are all built around the entire studio working from home for a sustained period of time, it's a hard plan to still have any kind of relevance to. So the big difference when we come out the back end of this is that everybody will have one. And the funny thing is that everybody's plan will look kind of similar. So hopefully at the back end of this, we'll actually, in these kind of situations, we'll be able to mesh together a little bit better. But I suspect what long-term disaster recovery plans are actually going to be slightly co-opted into, this is a different way of working that's going to become a part of how we work, rather than a sticking plaster or a temporary fix.
Sounds like an interesting topic for XDS 2020 this year. Perhaps a panel or a table topic. I just want to quickly say to those on the call, attending the call, if you have any questions or comments for the group, please use the virtual hands up. I'd love to let people in at any time to state a comment or a question. So you guys go ahead. So on the topic of, I guess, general mitigation, what are some of the kind of the guidelines or requirements that you did come up with for your partners to allow them to work from home? And I mean, in you know, certain priority order, like what, you know, what were some of those requirements that you put in place?
Again, a lot of it comes from our cybersecurity and IT department. You know, they were kind of hit off guard there too, and at the same time, we kind of had we have a newer person in charge of some of that, and you know, this was a way for him to dive in really deep, really quickly, and change our policies and make sure everyone was complying. If they're on their own hardware or if they're on company hardware or our hardware, you know, different requirements were involved there, you know, for locking down those systems and making sure everything was compliant. Otherwise, you know, with some of our partners that couldn't guarantee that, we've actually had to shift some work off of them and onto some other partners. And in fact, we're onboarding a new partner right now to take up some of that slack, where one company just said, we don't think we're secure enough to work on your Star Wars projects, for instance. So that's happened.
Very interesting. Carla, I saw you're reaching for the mute button there. Did you have a comment to add?
Yeah, sure. So we've had like a few different levels of things that we've both like at the coalition and with our external partners that we've wanted to try if we're working from home. So we have as a first step, like, please try and use remote access. That's kind of like the safest and most reliable option that we like to try everyone to try first whilst working from home. And then there's like several tiers below like that, which would require additional permissions from the coalition to try using, like, you know, taking a workstation home or things like that, which isn't our preferred method, but as long as we can kind of keep track of that, if that happens, that's fine. But there's also things like a general set of guidelines, like try not to be facing a window whilst you're working, try not to have people looking in, make sure that you don't have little prying eyes with little cameras looking over your back whilst you're working, things like that. So we have kind of like our technical guidelines and actually how to work from home in terms of working in engine and stuff like that. And then there's also like practical common sense things as well. So we have kind of two separate guidelines there.
And Carla, for you and others in a similar boat, did any of that become contractual, where you were amending, you know, master service agreements and consulting agreements? Did any of you guys see that kind of thing happening?
Not from my side. Did you have anything, Sam?
No, we didn't. We've not made anything contractual in there at all. I think as far as it's gone is just to remind people about what the commitments are under an NDA. Because the NDAs have switched from just being at the company level to now everybody needs to be aware of certain parts within that NDA and what their requirements are. I think right now legal teams are quite busy. I think if we were trying to draw up an amendment to every SAO or every master agreement that we have with our partners, we would be making a set of work that wouldn't be completed by the time this virus is.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, just so from where we were, because we started early, we did put more structure around the legal documents. There were extra NDAs and extra security documents. All employees who were allowed to work from home had to sign. They were also had given a handbook in terms of, you know, what's exactly what Carla says, although Carla wasn't one of the clients that we did this with, but, you know, in terms of making sure your roommate doesn't look over your shoulder, that type of thing. And in terms of getting the permission from our partners, I think, like Sam said, we couldn't get the legal team to revise the documents in time. So, but we made sure that we had emails, we had something that's in writing to ensure that it is acceptable for us to work from home. So there was some extra extra paperwork that was generated.
Anyone else want to jump in on guidelines requirements for partners? Okay.
I was impressed with how some of our partners were, how proactive partners were in volunteering the guidelines that they were using for their employees and contractors and so on, that were pretty much exactly what I would have requested for it, and how aligned it was with, there has been some movement in my organization's contracts that allows for this, and so it seemed pretty synchronous, the good intentions of partners and the requirements, just sort of mirroring the techniques and best practices that we use internally into what our partners do.
Thanks, Phil. So I did get a question actually in the Q&A queue from Ryan Faraji, and that's perfectly fine if you guys would like to use that Q&A queue. He has a question around intake of partners. So when your game title relies on captured content, so i.e. actors, mocap, what are solutions around self-quarantine that are helping to relieve these demands? Are any of you guys able to speak to that when it comes to that captured content and how you're maintaining that pipeline?
Alex, you can go. And
Alex, did you have a comment?
Oh yeah. We're looking at some creative solutions. Just trying things out, like having actors use webcams for facial capture. Some of our partners feel like they can extract data from that. We're going to see how it goes. As far as capturing stuff like photogrammetry, we're finding large open spaces where some of our artists feel comfortable bringing their own equipment and just shooting in these sort of open area environments where they're the only ones there. It's done on their own kind of voluntary basis. We're not asking anybody to do anything that they're not comfortable with, but we're just trying to push things forward as much as we can.
yeah, from my end, we are working with a service provider to set up a new process or a pipeline so actors can do a recording themselves without anyone's going into our studio or going to a different city. We're still testing the process. Depending on the quality, we might adapt that process, or we might postpone our milestones, saying that, okay, we can't deliver cinematic for this milestone, so we need to push all the cinematics for the next milestone. So we don't have a pipeline which is tested and working. We are in process of doing that.
Okay, great. And thanks, Ryan, for the question. If others have questions, feel free to put your virtual hand up or add them to the question queue, and we'll get you guys in. So Vladimir Turkarev has a question. Vladimir, I'm just going to take you off mute and go ahead with your question.
Okay. Hello, my name is Vladimir Tokarev from Russia. I'm CEO of Artmere Studio, and I have 2 ant colonies. Okay, I have a question especially for Carl, because the situation here is more complicated for us. I know that for successful passage of security risk assignment, new vendors need to provide special measures in their office. But now we have a forbidden law from government for working in office. And I don't know what I'm supposed to do, because I cannot open an office, and I have some obstacles for networking because conferences are locked down. And could this situation change security requirements and open external game development market for new vendors?
Well, for us, I mean, there's a couple of different choices. I mean, we have we now have a policy in place with all the settings that you'd have to do on your work computer. If it's a personal PC, we'd prefer not to do that. But if it's a work issued and you have a network and you can VPN into your network and then VPN into our network, so things are secure, that's how we're working currently.
Anyone else like to address that comment, question from Vlad?
I think it depends on the kind of studios you're working with. I think in a lot of ways we got a little bit lucky at Wildlife, and even at some of the past studios that I've worked at. We've worked with smaller studios that were already distributed. So I think there's obviously some people on this call that have sort of very strict security requirements in terms of like working from an office space. But I think there's still tons of people out there, myself included, whereas, we do have security requirements, but we also already work with some studios that are distributed already, which are already used to the sort of the work from home model. So I think it just depends on finding the right partner to work with.
I mean, just to add to that, so if it's more like independent people, like we have a lot of audio designers, things like that, that we will waive some of the higher security permissions temporarily, because usually they're working alone anyway, and they're at home, and it's not a big deal. There's minimal risk there. We're talking about for our bigger partners that we have huge teams on with that have to be secure because they might be IP that we've licensed and that sort of thing. Those are the main concerns, and then we'd have the leadership for those studios sign off on who can work at home and who can't.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd be saying the same thing if I was working on a Star Wars IP, so take that with a grain of salt.
Cool. Vlad, thank you so much for the question, and obviously wishing you all the best for you and your company in Russia. So guys, there's absolutely no doubt that this situation has caused significant challenges for external partners in impacted regions, as Vlad just pointed out, especially those who are small and independent and have a great deal of risk exposure. So the report that we published recently on the impact of COVID-19 on external development cited that 27% of service providers predict that they could sustain their business like this for only the next 3 to 6 months. So that's 1/4 of service providers that responded to the survey. So for our advisory committee members here on the panel, can you share any examples of how you or your companies have gone out of your way to support these service providers and do what you can so that they may survive the coming months? And obviously that's a big ask for you guys, but can you cite any examples of where you've kind of given that extra love and support?
Something that we're doing, this is something we generally do around this time of year anyway, but we're in the process of planning out our headcount ramps for the following financial year. So for up until like the end of June 2021. We will be communicating out ramps for like the entire year very shortly, because we want to get that out ahead of time so people are aware of kind of how their financial flow is going to be looking with us over the next year. So yeah, we want to give people as much of a heads up of what they can expect from us as possible. So yeah, if any of my suppliers are listening, that will be coming through soon. So we just want to give people as much of a heads up as possible of how their financial situation sits with us.
I think on our side, it's just like being understanding about deadlines, that if things are going to be a day or two late, heads up is always appreciated, but having more understanding for that on both sides, that we all are going through this together and things are going to happen in our personal life now that might be a little bit more of a priority than the work. So just having that extra grace with deadlines.
And anyone else want to chime in?
I'd just like to add a point. So we had penciled in certain work with a service provider. Due to some external dependencies, we can't go ahead with work. So what we're doing is we are considering to give some other work which was not really penciled in for them. It was penciled in for the internal team. But we thought, okay, maybe we can keep a skeleton team for now until things comes back to normal. Then maybe we can ramp up the team later. So that's something we are considering right now.
Cool. Ash, how about you from the services side? Have you seen any clients giving extra, extra love, extra care to support your studio, support your teams?
I think so much of it has been very personal. I think when China was first and before you hit the world, when the emails went out and said, hey, look, obviously we're going to be inefficient in how we're delivering to you, the response has been very positive. I have clients who actually made t-shirts and sent it to the team, which was so awesome. I think that's one. Also working with us for a work from home solution when possible. That was great. We did have some work shifted out the studio, but then came back. In other words, they had a deadline, but they were very kind in the sense that, we'll move it out for a month and then came back. It's been, Beijing, China's at the end of it, to be honest. But the past 2 or 3 months, I just felt that we were a lot more partners in solving this than the other way. There was a lot of caring in terms of employees, because I think a lot of our employees an extension of our clients' teams, and a lot of personal care was given to them. So yeah, it's been it's very well appreciated.
Okay, thanks, guys. So I have a question from Christina, and this is more, I guess, on the business operational side, but have you extended any kind of additional benefits to your employees to help them cope with work from home and the situation in general? Was there anything you found to be particularly effective? Alex?
Sorry,
Go ahead, Alex.
Activision has been, I assume we're talking about developers as well as
yes,
writers, but Activision's been, obviously I'm biased, but I feel really great about trying to make the transition to work from home as seamless as possible and as painless as possible, including offering reimbursement for additional expenses incurred, such as needing to upgrade your internet connection, or I can't think of what else it might need, but people have been able to submit invoices, and there's a limit, but every bit helps. And our IT departments, and I'm sure this is reflected across the industry, have been putting in monumental efforts to get working remotely for some of these massive teams like ours up and running very quickly. So as bad as it's been in terms of the disruption, it's been made a lot smoother by a very proactive team.
The glue side, yeah, they made it, if you need any, like a work chair or a desk or something like that, to ask. We've made mental health a huge thing, making sure that everyone is doing okay, and that, like putting out like insurance wise, like we do have health benefits that can cover that, etc. And then we've just been trying to create commodity, like we have like weekly trivia, virtual trivia, or Friday movies. We all can do a virtual watch party. So just making sure we all still flow together, even though we're each apart, but putting a lot of emphasis on making sure that your mental health is just as important as your work.
I think Microsoft went to the work from home policy quite quickly as a company all up. And I think they handled it. I think they handled it very well. And a lot of what we've talked about here is what they've done as well, in terms of giving some budget to people for chairs and work items and things like that they might need. I think there's also been one of the areas I think they've done well, is kind of hard to put a number on, is not putting pressure on to make sure that your productivity levels are as high as they were before the lockdown. That they're putting mental stress on, hey, we don't expect you to drop just because you're working from home. We don't expect. There has been an acceptance and an allowance and a kind of maturity around it that I've not seen, not just in Microsoft, but it's plenty of other companies that I think's allowed people to actually adjust to working from home and adjust to challenges. Because this isn't the normal work from home. This isn't saying, right, I can work from home. This is, I can work from home, I can do child care, and my partner can do her work from home, and we can split our work across 2 ways. And so we both roughly got half a day to get a day's worth of work done, and everything else behind, and everything else alongside that. Everything else is harder. Going to the shops is harder or impossible, or the simple things are longer and more complicated. And I think the companies I've seen do well are the companies that have not put any pressure on that.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. Again, to the audience, if you have more questions, feel free to add that to the Q&A feature, or you can put your virtual hand up in Zoom and I can take you off mute to address the group. So, you know, given the global situation right now, I imagine that there's probably, you know, various service providers out there that may be in need of new business. I guess for you guys, especially on the buyer side, on the dev publisher side, have you seen examples of just more service providers than usual reaching out and seeking new opportunities? Alex, I see a lot of nodding coming from you.
Yeah, I mean, you summed it up. I think all of us on the buyer side, as you put it, are probably used to a lot of contacts through LinkedIn and other sort of, let's call it cold call channels. And I feel like the volume of that has increased dramatically over the last 3 or 4 weeks. And with no wonder, you know, I know it's this disruption has caused a lot of projects to, I think the people on this call have all expressed that we're working from home and we're continuing to push forward, but I don't think that's the case industry-wide. And so I can only imagine there's been a huge impact, especially on some of the smaller providers who aren't, don't have some of the financial cushion of being part of a larger conglomerate. So yeah, it's a long-winded answer to say yes, we have seen quite a bit on my end, at least, increase in contacts.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Thanks, Alex. So we've got a question here from Penny Johnson. Great question. With the postponement of events, a lot of companies lost opportunity to network and connect with potential partners. So we're talking about GDC, E3. From your perspectives, what is now the best way to connect and reach out without the ability to meet in person, at least for the time being? And obviously, each of you are going to have different modes, different personal preferences.
And something that I found quite useful is I got contacted by an external team who put together like a showcase of new stuff that they've been doing over the past year. And so they were like, we just want half an hour just to kind of run through all of this new fun stuff with you. And, you know, I had half an hour in my calendar. It was nice to see new things that have been developing, new things that external teams have been focusing on in a fun little format that I could sit, I could ask questions. So yeah, that was a particularly good thing. So I was learning more about it with visuals as well. Visuals always help me. So yeah, that was a nice little random reach out.
I second that. We, in some cases, I had meetings set up for GDC, and when that was canceled, I moved them to online meetings, which actually gave me the opportunity to invite some of the studio stakeholders that wouldn't have been able to attend GDC to sort of sit in on the pitch with me, and that's been helpful. The downside of that is that a lot of the stakeholders in our content teams are packed with meetings in order to maintain alignment, and asking them to put in another half an hour to hear a pitch, it's not always easy. But the silver lining is that I can include people who otherwise wouldn't have had the chance and would ultimately be one of the decision makers for selecting a vendor.
Yeah, I'll mirror what a lot of other folks said, but basically I'm always open to seeing new art. So even through sort of, I'll say cold call channels like LinkedIn or whatever, like if you've updated your ArtStation page or if you've posted some new stuff, like it's always great to see it. So I think it's, yeah, anytime someone reaches out, I've talked to a bunch of people recently who've just spent a lot of time updating their portfolio in the last few weeks. And it's always great to see everyone's cool new art and everything that we're working on.
Okay, great. And Penny, thank you so much for that question. I see more questions rolling in. So we can say, of course, that we're all in this together, and it's a phrase that's commonly being, thrown around these days. But I also feel that this situation could open the door to there being friction between clients and partners that perhaps wasn't there before. I hope that might be safe to say. So have any of you run into difficult situations with your partners, of course, without naming names or projects, and maybe just willing to share a little bit about the challenges that you faced? Because I can't imagine it's all been, rainbows and bubblegum.
I'll go if no one else wants to.
Go for it, Carla.
Okay, so the main thing that I've noticed, broadly speaking, is that a lot of things have become more reactive rather than proactive, I would say. What with things are changing so quickly all of the time, it can lead to maybe milestones changing a little bit, headcount requirements changing a little bit, and so having to kind of react to those fast, I find can cause that little bit of friction. But yeah, trying to combat that by making sure that kind of taking a step back, looking at the entire situation, keeping communication regarding any quick reactive changes as transparent as possible, and making sure that keeping everyone in the loop in anything new that's happening as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we have friction with any of our partners really out of this. I think it's more of adjusting your expectations a little bit and just modifying schedules as needed and prioritizing the work that has to be done and who's going to do that work.
Okay. And please, Ashley.
I'll chime in, and I hope that whoever I'm talking about is not on this chat, but we have had a very small client have come back to one of our UK studios have asked for a price decrease because knowing that they will need the business. So that was not pleasant.
Interesting. And can you speak on how you navigated that one, Ashley, or is that in the midst of discussions?
I think that's in the midst of discussions right now. I think there is going to be, I don't know where things are going to fall out, because it's sort of going to be a balancing act in terms of, yes, there's going to be a lot of studios that, or service providers that will need work, but on the flip side, there might be fewer service providers. So this is a demand and supply kind of issue. We'll see how that balances out. But we didn't walk away. We're still in the midst of negotiations and trying to find that balance that will suit all of us.
Okay, thanks for sharing, Ash. Okay, and again, to those attending the call, if you have any questions, please or comments, please enter them, and I'll try my best to get to those. So we're starting to near the end. We've only got about 10 minutes left. So even though shifting work to home causes a number of challenges with respect to security, legal, IT, some of these areas we've touched on earlier today, it seems that this new reality may also lend itself to opportunities to change the way we work and to do distributed development. I, for example, am having a hard time envisioning myself getting in my car 5 days a week and driving into the office physically now that I've become accustomed to this new lifestyle. But obviously, as things change, things come back to normal. So, are there examples you'd point to where you hope that some of these adaptations that you've made may stick around for the long run?
I don't know if it's an adaptation.
Go ahead, Grayson.
I was going to say, so our company was already in a pilot test for seeing how a more global work from home policy would work. So this kind of forced us into that in a big way. And so far, it seems like everyone's pretty happy with it and likes to work. I'm someone who actually likes to go into the office. I like to work at home occasionally, but I'm not. I feel like I'm more productive at the office and not distracted by other things. And just having that interaction one-on-one with people, a lot of ideas are generated easier, I think, and a lot more gets accomplished collaboratively if you're sitting across the table from someone. But that being said, I think Zynga giving us the flexibility to work at home, and I think it'll get bigger, and maybe sharing hotel desks, things like that, are going to be the new norm, and reducing the footprints in some offices and letting people work from home. It could be advantageous in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, Hulu's been able to ship 2 titles being completely remote. So, I mean, it's possible to do. It's not easy, but it is possible. And I think that's been a big win for our companies, seeing that we can collaborate together, even being remotely.
I think that there's going to be a range of reactions or adjustments which are all beneficial. I know Chris, you're in Vancouver, Carl, you're in San Francisco, I'm in Los Angeles. One of the hard parts with retention is that these are very expensive cities to live in. And what this may show is that if people are interested in continuing to work but want to move to a less expensive part of the country, I'm not speaking specifically for my studio, but I think you'll see more and more that that's something studios might entertain if their job is something that can be done full-time remotely. And then there is the other benefit, as Carl brought up, that 1 or 2 days a week, everybody might want to just work from home for a day and save the commute and take care of other stuff. I think studios will be much more open to that now. I hope so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of agree with Alex. I think most studios will be open to work from home. And also, I think the most studios will be open to code development. I think I've seen a lot of studios, they were not happy to do code development because they had to put a build outside the building or put an engine outside the building. They're not very comfortable doing that. Now we are forced to do that. So I think more studios will be open for code development. I think that's good news for service providers.
Interesting.
On my side, the one thing I noticed is interesting that I've seen a lot more sort of understanding and support from internal sort of leads and art directors and other things like that for what we do on the external development side. So like, oh, I get it now. I understand now why it's so difficult. And here are some things that they've been willing to do, that they've stepped up to help out the process a little bit more. That's been very heartwarming to see.
Cool.
I think if we succeed in what we're all trying to do, then any remaining reluctance to having certain kinds of work done offsite will sort of have solved that question, and will give us all better opportunity to expand capacity with our teams. Say, you thought it wasn't possible, we just proved it is. Well said,
sir. I'm going to, there's a number of questions in the queue. We've only got a couple short minutes left here. I'm going to close with this last question from James Zhang from Concept Art House. Hi, James. Thank you for the question. So James is asking you guys on the dev publisher side, we see some good games getting delayed, like Last of Us 2, for example, and other titles getting a tremendous boost, like Animal Crossing. Can you guys talk about how the health crisis has impacted you as a game publisher? Does anyone want to take that one?
For us, it's definitely on the upside. you know, people still need content, and a lot more content now that they're shut in. And, you know, as an entertainment industry, we're benefiting from this actually in some ways, you know, definitely financially. Yeah.
From the Xbox side, you can see the amount of Xbox traffic is quite impressive, and it's sure it's causing a headache for a lot of technical teams. But we can't, in terms of interest and in terms of what it does for games, it's had a lot of big positives, especially on community games. When you look at things like Sea of Thieves and games like that, that have more people online who would normally maybe not be in the same room together, maybe not have the time to play online. We're seeing big upticks in those kind of areas. So it's been it's been in many ways quite a positive from a publisher point of view.
Yeah, for us it's been good, and also it's giving us a better connection with our players. You know, like doing initiatives like you see, like the play together, stay at home. We just feel like a deeper connection with our players, I think, through all this. You know, because we're providing these games that kind of give them a break from reality and just kind of help them through this hard time. So we are very honored to be part of these people's lives that are downloading and playing our games, that we can provide something, for a distraction.
Okay. Well, guys, I think we're going to leave it on that high note. James, thanks for that last question. Advisory committee members, I can hear the virtual applause going around the room. So thank you so much for your time and your insights today. We all really appreciate it. And for all of you on the call, I wish you, health and security and, good luck, personally and in your businesses in the coming weeks and months. And keep an eye on updates from XDS as we continue to deliver sessions like this that are relevant to the global health crisis. And we'll do what we can to support the community. Okay. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Be safe.
Stay safe.
Take care.
Everyone.
Yeah, bye.